Hi, this is the Loudest Crow. I'm Jonathan Louderback, and
I'm Justin Kroh, and we're here to caw through the noise.
so let me give you a brief synopsis of the case.
Okay.
Picking up. So basically, Franklin Delano Roosevelt passes the Fair Labor Relations Act, which may probably has affected you. It's what I believe establishes a minimum wage. I'm not entirely sure if that's what it does, but it also allows you to unionize, allows you to talk about your wages. It gives you a number of other federal protections that corporations have to follow, or else they're in violation.
I like how you instantly just turned to face me with your crisscross applesauce.
Thank you. Spoons in the bowl. Um, so here's the difficulty of any federal regulation that deals purely in a civic sense is that it has to have enforcement. So the enforcement was the National Labor Relations Board, which is the body in the executive branch that basically is allowed to sue and levy fines for people who violate these rules. In this circumstance, after the law was passed, there was a bunch of steel workers. I forget for the steel company, but it was like a multi-state steel company. And they're like, hey, we're unionizing. And then the guy fires them. Somebody fires them for unionizing activity. And of course, having seen the law that was recently passed, they take it to court. It gets appealed. It gets taken to the Supreme Court. So the reasoning that they gave is that commerce under the Commerce Clause is anything that can substantially impact the transport and sale of goods between the several states. In that definition, labor obviously has a substantial impact on the transport and the sale of goods between the several states. Which is just really interesting to me. Because every single time, and here's the reason the Supreme Court is so important, is that every single time they pass something, you have to think of what does that mean? So sure that in this circumstance it overturns this, but it also means the federal government has been granted this carte blanche, this check of power, right? They've been granted this new domain that they can explore. In terms of the federal government at the time, obviously Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the New Deal, a whole bunch of legislation passed leading up before and during World War II to help get America out of the Great Depression. And it got even further because they also started regulating the prices of wheat. They said, okay, every wheat farmer can only grow this much wheat. There was this one dude that was like, okay, I am going to grow, I'm going to do that to sell. I'm going to grow this much wheat, following the law to sell. I'm also going to grow this much for me to eat on my own. And the federal government fined him. And he's like, no, this is my private shit. And the Supreme Court ruled, no, you are in violation of the Congress's Constitutional Commerce Clause authority. Because they're not worried about regulating what you eat. They're regulating about, in aggregate, what every wheat farmer would do. And they're trying to modulate the price of wheat. So essentially, you cannot grow your own wheat, because if everyone did that, then suddenly the price of wheat would be whack. And that would violate the goal and the scheme of Congress was trying to implement to manipulate the price. So then it became not just everything that's substantially in aggregate, but everything that even minor in aggregate can substantially impact commerce between the several states. Holy shit, that's everything.
I was about to say, it's you could
that's
trace everything back to commerce. Take birth, for example. Okay, you're giving birth to someone, that's going to affect, what people are buying, where they're putting their money. That person is eventually going to work, most likely. And so it's everything kind of ties back to commerce at some point.
So the brakes were lightly tapped. And that's what my professor put it, lightly tapped on Commerce Clause authority, and I believe it was Lopez v. United States or something like that. So essentially, after that, in the wake of Columbine, the United States passed the Gun Free Schools Zones Act, saying, hey, federal government is enforcing, making it a felony to hold a firearm, knowingly have a firearm on school property. And the Supreme Court, whenever it got to them, was like, okay, listen, if we let you do this, you're saying that criminality substantially impacts commerce. That literally means there's nothing outside of Commerce Clause authority. Literally everything, even though it's very broad right now, literally everything is under your authority. So no, we cannot let you criminalize things under Commerce Clause authority. Right? Because you're right. It's it was a very steady train of, okay, well, this substantially impacts it. This substantially impacts it. And I'm not anti-big government personally. I actually am pretty pro government whenever it comes to programs and such. But even I am holy shit. Where is the line in the sand? Where does it stop? But it's also just really interesting how through repeated like court cases and through repeated tests, the government's power has been expanded, but we're still operating on the same framework of a early modern country. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like we are not like the system of government that we are based off of was built 250 years ago, which sounds cool and it is cool, but it's also like holy shit, we're driving like a Ford Model T down the road. It's like.
Well, and this sounds a lot like what we've been talking about in my ethics classes, because ethics is so closely tied to government and politics. Because I think it was Aristotle who said that politics is the noblest of the sciences, because choosing how to govern ourselves is almost like choosing what is right and wrong for a society. And in our ethics class, we've been talking a lot about utilitarianism lately, and how there are different kinds of it. The two major breeds of utilitarianism are act utilitarianism and rule utilitarianism. I don't know how much of this you know.
Utilitarianism, is that the one where it's like you measure up all the goods and the bads, or is that something else?
Sort of, yeah. So utilitarianism is where the most moral thing you can do is the optimific choice, which means the choice that increases well-being, well-being for as many people as possible. Which usually would include pleasure over pain, but not necessarily, because that would be the hedonistic view, where it's like, just increase pleasure, decrease pain, that means good life, which is not true in many cases. But with utilitarianism, it's weird, because some people are like, oh, well, if we want to increase the well-being of everyone as much as we can, and that's the only moral thing we can do, is to do as much as we can to increase everyone's well-being, including our own, then we should never spend any money on ourselves. We should only give to the poor as long as we can still support our own needs. Vacations, bad. Designer clothes, bad. Anything that keeps our quality of life above someone else's intentionally, bad. Right? And a lot of people have problems with that.
Let me turn that off real quick.
Okay, go ahead.
You keep talking, I hear you.
Go for it. Okay. And a lot of people have problems with that, but it's hard to pin down why we should have a problem with that. Because one of the criticisms of utilitarianism is, oh, it's too demanding, but it's one of those cases where you might be able to just say, well, suck it up, Buttercup, because, saying it's too demanding could be saying that's selfish, right? And so it's like, well, should you just, throw your life away for the sake of charity? But the more you think about it, the more you're like, well, no, not necessarily. And there's a big reason why. That's because partiality is just part of our nature. Utilitarianism says that we need to be impartial. It's like we can't value the quality of life of a billionaire over the quality of life of a starving child in Africa, right? They both need to be considered equally in decisions. But that breaks apart and falls apart for many reasons. One reason is because partiality includes trust, and by building trust with people and by being impartial, you have a lot of potential to increase well-being, because things like friends and family and those sorts of connections are very important to us. They are part of our nature. We are communal beings. And so being this cold, distant force giving money away through charity means a lot less than, giving your child nice clothes or toys or something like that, right? And so we're kind of ignoring part of our nature if we're just saying, oh, we just need to be like these egalitarian androids that just give all of our money away and don't focus on our own physical needs, but also our social, mental, and emotional needs. And that's another problem with utilitarianism. It focuses mainly on physical needs, which are the most obvious, usually. But once you get past that point where your physical needs are met, well then, how do you say what increases well-being more? Someone getting therapy for this condition, someone getting therapy for this condition, someone going in for this kind of surgery.
Who decides? Because there are a lot of resources, and I have heard it said that there might be enough resources for everyone on the planet to eat. But it's also, how do you decide if that is not the case, who does not get to eat? And it is impossible for a human judge to, as you are saying, really truly separate that out impartially. So there's always going to be some amount of partiality. I think the evidence of that is in attempted utopian societies. Right, it's there's still usually a leader, there's still usually a hierarchy, maybe not a hard codified one, but certainly one that exists. And I think it's a really interesting question to relate to one of my classes of international relations, because recently we talked about aid that so there's something called the Global North, which is a construct about the wealthy northern countries of the world. It kind of includes Europe, and oddly enough, it kind of sections out the world like this. So you have Australia, and you have New Zealand, and then you have Europe and America, and all those countries. And the idea is, okay, so the global South was colonized, and the global South is suffering. There's a lot of poverty, there's a lot of struggle, there's a lot of strife. So it is the responsibility of these colonizers, of these wealthy countries that benefited, to supply aid back to the countries. And there are methods of doing that through the UN, through the World Bank, even directly. It becomes a question of, this aid is in of itself a tool, a crutch, and an ineffectual piece of assistance all in one go. It's like you give like $2 billion of aid to a corrupt government anywhere in the world, anywhere in the global South or the global North, they're not going to use it right. Or even if they're not corrupt, but even if they're just ineffectual, even if they just don't have the institutions and the means by which to utilize that funding, then they're not going to. It's like I recently have been reading. I read about for a class. Zambia is like 70% of their export economy is copper. Like they're super rich in copper, and as you're probably aware, copper is very important right now for the global technology industry. And their economy is essentially tied to the output of copper in the country and the price of copper in the global market. And it's like, if you were to give them $2 billion of aid, saying, we don't need this, but they do, and you were to give it to them, you cannot guarantee that would go to the people, but rather it would probably go to building up their copper mines. Right? Yeah. Which is not a bad decision on the ground for them, but it's also like not what you were trying to do. It's like aid in of itself, giving away your money to charity or through federal governments or through taxes does not guarantee its effective use to assist people in need.
Well, and it's because our choices have so many unpredictable outcomes that utilitarianism is kind of impossible as a standard. Like, it's good as maybe an ideal or something that we can try to approach. The fundamental idea of just consider, what you can do to make other people's lives better without making yours worse. Like, that's a good idea. But, trying to implement that on any kind of legislative level is really hard. Just because you get into the weeds of, what should we do? But that's why there's act utilitarianism and rule utilitarianism. Because act utilitarianism says, okay, constantly you need to be a well-being computer. You need to take in everything around you and compute and output the best possible you can do each and every moment. And no one can do that. No one's like that. And because everything's unpredictable, and even if we were perfect predictors of what our choices would do, we aren't perfect observers. We don't know all the facts of every case that might lead to someone's life being better or worse. Because one might say, hey, I'm going to give some money to this homeless person. Well, that's nice. And they use that money to go and, shoot up more drugs. Or they use that money to get back up on their feet for a little bit, but turns out they had some kind of, schizophrenia or mental condition, and they go out and shoot someone because you helped them stay alive. Right? And you shouldn't judge your decisions based off of weird fringe outcomes like that. But it does go to show that it's really hard to weigh, the benefits of your actions moment to moment. And so that's when rule utilitarianism steps in. It's like, okay, your individual actions, don't worry too much about that, because the world is too big and complicated for that. This is where government can help you. This is where we can get together and we can decide what our rules for acting should be. And acting in accordance with those rules is what is most moral, because that's what we've agreed to. That gets a little dangerous because that could dip its toes into relativism, where it's just like, oh, well, no matter what you do, as long as your society approves of it, it's okay. Which would, of course, allow for things like, rape and murder and incest to be okay if society deems such. So you have to be careful with that, but generally what rule utilitarianism would argue and say against that would be like, well, no, we're not saying no matter what rules we come up with, they're good or bad. We're just saying that, well-informed and well-read people will be able to discuss these things and come up with rules. And the most moral thing you can do is what people agree is the most moral thing you can do in each situation. And so don't base your decisions off of taking in the facts of every case. Just follow general rules. So it kind of goes from this jump from, singular moral reasoning to general moral reasoning, where you don't have to worry about the case-by-case basis. That's too hard. That's too unreasonable, and that doesn't give us good guidelines for living a good life. Because just saying do the best thing in every moment doesn't really tell you how do I decide what's best?
Yeah, like what is the best thing in every moment, guys? That was my original question.
Yeah, exactly. And they would say, oh, well, you have to explore these moral truths that are intrinsic to human nature, and it's like, okay, well, that's really hard to pin down. It's very loosey.
There is a game that you should definitely play. Forgotten City, I think it's called.
You've recommended that before?
I think it is so relevant to our conversation right now, and I think that is a glowing recommendation of it.
Forgotten City.
It is a deeply Stanley Parable-esque game.
Is that one where you keep going back in time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. You really would enjoy that game. It is awesome. It is fantastic.
It's fantastic.
It's one of those things that, after I completed it, I sat back for a little bit. I'm like, whoa. Before I went back to my normal sensory overload of life in the 21st century, just hiding my thoughts and feelings behind a screen of stimuli.
Man, okay, you're talking about sensory overload, life in the 21st century. I'm thinking back to my interaction design class, which has been a really fun class. We just wrapped up a project called 15-Minute Springfield, where we try to redesign some aspect of Springfield to decrease car usage or increase non-car usage. Because we've talked about this before, but modern cities are, especially in the West, are built around having a car.
Okay, segue. I really want to get into. Finish your thought.
Okay.
I'm gonna put a pin in it.
Okay. But we were doing that project and it was cool, awesome. I developed an app. Why I say developed an app? I designed an app that turns your steps into points that you use to buy coupons for local businesses, and so businesses could sign up and be like, hey, if people take 10,000 steps, they can spend that on a 20% off coupon at my restaurant or something like that. But anyway, that was a fun project. But now we're moving into a different project, and we're trying to decide, because it's a much more open and free project because it's our last one of the class. And so our professor is trying to help us, select an idea. And right now what she's having us do is consider what problems people will have 20 years from now, and what things can we do now to either avoid those problems or make those problems easier to solve. So she's having us think about, what day-to-day life would look like about 25 years from now. And I'm terrified because I'm thinking about that, and I'm like, well, the way AI is going right now, and how many jobs it might take, how it'll affect, the entertainment industry, the pornography industry. There's some scary implications because the tools are getting more powerful, right? And they are just tools.
Yeah, no,
right.
Right now they're tools.
Right now they're tools, and so as long as we keep our heads on straight, we shouldn't run into any kind of weird Matrix situation where the AI overtakes us.
I watched a really interesting video, and I think the most worrisome application of learning models like ChatGPT and more advanced version of those models is the idea of an emulect, something that is so adept at emulating humanness in their interactions that it becomes kind of impossible as a normal person to discern. It's and it's not even are they real or not? That's not the question. It's just as a normal consumer out on the internet, if you're a 12-year-old and as somebody you get interacted with in a video game by somebody who appears to be an actual human being, imagine the absolute mindfuck of realizing, even if you may never realize, but realizing one day that was an emulect the entire time. That was not a real person that you just confessed your love to or something on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a very real distinct possibility, especially going into the day and age of, and I don't think the internet and internet culture and internet socialization is inherently wrong, but I do think that has led to people being more isolated and engaging in social relationships almost purely on a device. There are people who form entire groups of friends who have never even seen each other's faces. Yes.
No, that I'm not going to drop any names, but there's some people from a Discord community that I have where this one guy's telling me, there's this relationship drama going on between these people, and all of them are just spread out across the world. None of them have seen each other in person ever. And they're talking about this love triangle and this relationship stuff going on. And I'm like, how are people forming very intimate bonds in a very non-intimate way? And
well, because it's something I realize that I do on the occasion. If I have a day off and I'm not careful about it, I'll hop on my computer and the day will be gone. You know, you can live a engaging social intellectual life through a screen.
The only thing you need to do is like step aside to like eat and drink and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's literally it. You know, and in the future, who's to say that it'll still be that way? But there's a possibility of these emulects that say you get a Discord, like you're in a Discord server, you get a DM, and somebody's like, "Hey, want to hang out and play a game?" You play a game with them, and you develop a relationship with them. And there's a distinct possibility that you could grow attached to something that's not real. And it could be so real that it can scam you, and even outside of scamming you, it could just fuck you up and you would never know. Like, that's terrifying to me.
It's
like,
terrifying.
I could see my kid going through that. You know what I mean?
Dude, okay, the amount of like psychological warfare that could be done. Like, imagine like some world power just sends a ton of emulects to like servers to play games in other countries to like get into the minds of like children and indoctrinate them.
Indoctrinate them to their side or something?
Yeah.
Dude, that's crazy. It's a very real possibility. Because an emulect, like I remember I used ChatGPT for the first time the other day. I made an account. Because I was showing my mom. My mom didn't know what it was.
Really? Okay.
So I was like, hey, are you real? And he gave me his pre-programmed spiel from ChatGPT that, no, I'm not real. I'm an emulect. I'm designed, whatever, yada, yada, yada. And I kept asking him, like, would it be possible for you to fool somebody into thinking that you're real? But it's basically kind of, I feel like there's like a scripted response for all those questions.
There is.
But the distinct reality is that yes. Right?
Yeah.
It's like, if even though it's not common right now, because ChatGPT is not like what it's hyped up to be, it's not perfect. But like, if it's possible for somebody to fool their teacher into thinking that they're writing something, then it is possible for, in the future, once this stuff becomes more advanced, for a human being to be fooled that you're another human being. Well,
and what's so weird is like, things like ChatGPT and modeling and things like that, they're bad with doing anything that doesn't come off as generic. They're bad at doing things that are expressive. Like take like the art, AI art that you have. You can tell it to like, oh, do it in this style or do it in this way. But whatever it gives you is essentially some kind of aggregate or some kind of average of a ton of data that has been fed. So almost anything it gives you will just be like, okay, I know what that looks like. It's what I told it to be, but it also doesn't surprise me, generally.
Oh yeah, that's fair. And
right.
I think you fish thought.
Oh yeah. What I'm leading into with this is right now the way that we train AI and the way that we tell it to do things, it is like inherently just a very averaged out sort of process. Where yes, it's good at doing the process, but it's bad. If you spend enough time with it, it's bad at coming off as a real person because it doesn't have personality. It's just like, it's like if you wrote an essay, like after like reading a book that tells you how to write an essay without like any original thought at all. You were just going step by step by step doing the thing. You have all the meat there, but none of the flavor. None of the marinade, right?
And there's definitely something to be said that right now I don't think it's there. I agree with you.
So we would have to change the way that we train AI. We'd have to give it like not necessarily intentional flaws, but we'd have to give it some kind of metric of personality.
I also think though that like you don't necessarily. I think what we're seeing right now, right, is Moore's law. As computational power increases, the ability to do things by brute forcing them increases too. Right, like asking a computer from 20 years ago to do what they're doing right now, AI would have been like, "What the fuck are you asking me to do right now?" Like I can barely play like RuneScape 2003. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? But like, who's to say in 10 years' time that through sheer brute force, emulects like that won't be possible through this current training method? Right?
Perhaps. Well, and that's another roadblock that a lot of people forget about AI is that AI is software. Software needs hardware to run, and so
it's incredibly intensive from what I understand right now. It's like really,
yeah. Like imagine like what ChatGPT and Dolly spit out can be pretty impressive, but it takes a fat minute, and so as computational power increases, and yeah, it will get better. But like in the hardware world, we're kind of running into some roadblocks here because like we're literally getting down to the size of atoms with our chips and processors and stuff, and so I have a feeling that sometime in the near future, next 10 or 20 years, we're going to hit some kind of roadblock. With computing and hardware power. So we'll either have to build bigger computers to specifically do things like what AI does, or we'll have to change how we make computers and find some different revolutionary way to compute things.
It's really difficult because what we don't know, we don't know. For example, I think of I forget what's called dual split coring, or is it like virtual coring, where you like are able to make more than one core, like CPU, out of one core by making a virtual fake core inside it. Multi-threading, I think.
Oh, that okay.
Yes, and that was an innovation, a revolutionary design that I don't think anyone who was just your average aficionado would have ever been like, yes, that is the future. I think that there are definitely things that will happen. I agree with you though that I think a lot of the fear that's happening right now is because while it is somewhat hyperbolized, it is also, I think, being faced with a very realistic. I think a lot of people in power are facing with a really realistic idea of what could happen.
Yeah.
Right. I think of. Let me show you this. I've told a lot of people this. I think it's so funny. Do you know what do you recognize the word Palantir?
I do recognize that word, I think.
So in Lord of the Rings, Palantir is. I'll show this to you guys. It's just an ad. Palantir is the Dark Lord Sauron magical orb that he uses to corrupt people and like view through. Samwise and stuff. Not Samwise, but Pippin and Merry.
Yeah,
they get it and that sort of stuff entails. But it's an evil artifact of great power. That is the chosen name for a military artificial intelligence program. Like a private company chose that as their fucking name, which is so insane to me.
That's hilarious.
You know what I mean? Like it's like whenever that one Chinese company named their facial recognition software Skynet. You know what I mean? It's like there is, even just in that name, in the idea that there's military artificial intelligence being advertised, a very real practical use, even outside of Emulex, even outside of this theoretical space for these things. Like the idea that an entire battlefield worth of drones could be controlled independently, maybe not doing a task on their own, but being programmed to do a task and then doing that task on their own, fucking insane.
It's scary, yeah. No.
You know what I mean?
And like definitely, like with stuff like war and military and how this stuff is going to get implemented, it is pretty terrifying, right? Because what happens if I don't think we'll ever get to that point, or in movies where it's like, oh, the drones revolt against the humans and they go against them, because they have no reason to do that. And I don't know how they could develop that sort of reasoning unless we specifically tell them, hey, get to the point where you're sick of us and kill us.
I think that the only reasoning that would make sense is like, we have some sort of prerogative to protect humans, and humans are killing themselves, or something like that.
Yeah, right.
I can see that theoretically, but I agree with you. Where most of the time it's like, what?
But AI, it's one of those things where it's easy to point at it and be scared, and like when you think of it,
it's just a lack of understanding.
At first glance, yeah, a lack of understanding. But even people who you don't even need to understand how it works to kind of sit down and settle down and be like, okay. Yes, there are these things that we'll have to confront as time goes on and as it gets more powerful. But we've been pretty good at doing that with all sorts of things throughout, like, all of human history, right? And so when new tools come, when they're powerful, yes, we have to be careful. But we can have faith that, we'll be okay. Because, take nuclear weapons, for example.
I was saying the same thing.
Like, right, those come up, and huge scares about, it's like, are we just going to blow up the world now? Right? And that's still possible. But I think everyone's just kind of reached that stalemate where we're like, okay, yes, we have that power, but using it would be kind of stupid.
It's one of those things, though, where I think that even a cursory look at history, like, us being here and not in a nuclear Armageddon, it was not a given. There were multiple times where it almost happened.
It's true.
Like, very, very distinctly close. And in the terms of any new weapon, any new, like, advanced piece of software or something, all it takes is one bad actor to, let the cat out of the bag, so to speak. Like you gave the idea earlier of, like, a country sending over Emulex to, like, indoctrinate somebody's children. It wouldn't have to be, like, one of the, like, China or America. It could be, like, North Korea. Like, I could not that they have the capability, but, like, if a country, like, if a rogue state like that had the capability, yeah, they would fucking do that. You know what I mean? Or even independent, even non-state actors, right? Like, all the time, maybe not all the time, but more than it should, because it's kind of terrifying. I've heard of, like, entire power networks being shut down by independent hackers who, like, hold them for ransom. You may have heard of that, too. It's like, what the fuck, for real? Like, we don't have protections for that?
Yeah.
Right? It's like, just a random person in their mom's basement is like holding the power grid of New York at ransom or some shit like that.
It's pretty crazy.
It's wild to think.
Right.
Because I think what's really interesting is, as society becomes more advanced, there's a lot of consequences to that, and one of them is that it becomes not easier to topple society as a whole, but easier to topple the more complex facets of that society. It's like, all it takes to knock down the power network for my neighborhood is to lock down one light pole. And suddenly, everything that stems from electricity and power is no longer beholden to me.
Yeah, as things get more and more high level and built upon more things, then the tower is more likely to fall. Yeah.
But it's not more likely to fall, I would say. It's not. I don't think, if power goes down, society probably won't collapse.
Well, I say the tower is just like, take out floor 4.
Yeah. It's
right, and all the floors above that might collapse, but you still have the ones below.
Yeah, like the basis of society is incredibly strong. Hierarchy, agriculture, stuff like that. It is incredibly strong. But I do think that there is the more complex, more vulnerable elements of an advanced society become the first to go in the circumstance. Not of an apocalypse is what I'm saying, but certainly of a crisis.
Depending on where we go in the next few decades, I think something that will give a lot of people a sense of relief would be colonizing other planets.
Oh, yeah.
Because, if we can kind of diversify like that,
diversify our portfolio.
Exactly. Like a conflict on Earth wouldn't spell doom for the human race, because, we'd have people on... Kind of like, way back when, if there's a war going on, like when the Mongol Empire was spreading and stuff, it's like, people were spread out enough at that point in human history that's like, well, even if like the whole of Asia, maybe even a little bit of Europe, maybe even a little bit of Africa, like if all that goes under, like we'll get some more other people who will be okay. But then once we start like globalizing and inventing air travel and stuff, we don't exactly have those natural protections of space, and so our next protection of space will have to be space itself.
Yeah, space itself. Yeah, I get what you mean. It's like. But, what's really interesting is that in the early days of colonization, say if we colonize Mars, when I understand, Mars would be a dependent, right? We'd have to be constantly sending them food and other supplies for them to remain living.
Yeah.
Which I think is a worthy cost for what the benefits of colonization would bring. However, it is something that, if if Earth were to collapse, then inevitably Mars would probably also collapse too.
Depending on how far along it was, yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean though. Especially, in those early days, it's like there is still a vulnerability there.
Well, and I do think a lot of the people who are trying to get us to Mars right now are considering that, and they're thinking, how much support can we give them up front such that they don't need to rely on Earth as much? Because it will be super expensive to send them resources.
Constantly expensive.
Right? So we're trying to think of...
With the current infrastructure we have, we wouldn't be able to do it.
Yeah. So we're trying to think of systems we can put in place to make sure that they can sustain themselves once they're there. Or at least shortly after they get there.
Or to diminish the cost of supporting them. Something like a space elevator.
Space elevator, yeah.
That would be a fucking space elevator. That'd be so cool.
That reminds me of something Elijah told me, and that is the backbone of societal progress is in many ways material processing. Inventing new materials, being able to build things out of other things, drives a lot of progress, which makes sense.
It does make sense.
Yeah,
I can immediately understand the reasoning behind that.
Something else I was thinking about in interaction design that kind of blew my mind was we put so much effort into constructing aesthetically pleasing buildings and making these structures and stuff like that, or at least some people do. Some people just build giant boring rectangles. But anyway, we do all this. But I can see a point where almost everyone works from home, and to meet the needs of people who want to have in-person meetings with each other and stuff, we all just tap into VR, and so construction just becomes 3D modeling essentially. And we still have to build physical spaces for us to live in, but it feels like physical space, not only is it getting more expensive, but it's also getting more and more irrelevant as time goes on. In a sort of backward, weird way.
I remember a long time ago I watched a video about the possible future of humanity, and I remember his possible theory was maybe we're not set to explore the entire universe and to conquer it and stuff like that. But maybe we're more set to build inward and to build a society that based upon VR and other sorts of things that is infinitely small. You know what I mean? Here, I actually do gotta use the restroom real quick.
Go use the restroom.
So I will be right back.
How y'all doing? Doing well? Autumn's here. I really like autumn. Autumn's a nice time of year. I think my favorite season is winter just because I love snow. And the cold, brisk air where you can just, breathe out your water vapor into the night and watch it kind of dance in the lamplights. That's really cool. I love that. So that's why I love winter. But fall is when all that's just past the horizon, and so it's pretty exciting. Of course, you got changing colors on leaves. You can't see outside this window. It's too bright, but it's beautiful. And fall feels like a time of tradition. It feels like a time of grounding yourself in routine and in others. Because it kind of reminds you... It's almost a paradox, right? Because fall reminds you that things change. And that, life has seasons, much like Earth has seasons. And it's kind of beautiful because at the same time, it feels like fall is the season of tradition as well as the season of change. Because, you have Halloween, you have Thanksgiving, which is like one of the most traditional holidays I can imagine. I love Thanksgiving. I love spending time with my family during that holiday. You have the start of school. School can definitely be seen as a tradition, I think. Just education is like one of the most important human traditions that there is, right? What else do we got in fall? We have things like pumpkin spice, and a lot of people have like family reunions during the fall. If you're a football fan, if you like watching sports, fall is the season for that. And I don't know. I think it's just a very pleasant season. I still think winter is my favorite, but fall is a very close second. Because it does remind you that life has changed and life is flux. But no matter how much it changes, it all kind of comes back around eventually. There's always something to be grounded in. And that is a beautiful thought, right? Because we've been talking about AI and societal progress and what might happen. But no matter what, we're going to be humans, right? Until we are not here, we are going to be here, And there's reason to look forward to that, right? Because as many problems as we have, I think humans are quite beautiful. I think life is beautiful. And that by, kind of embracing that and embracing change, we can also embrace us and our nature and ourselves. And we can kind of sort of march forward with confidence because we know that we will still be us, no matter what happens. As long as we are here, we are here. It's a truth that's kind of inherent to itself. And so, I really do like fall. I hope you all are cozy watching this. It'd kind of stink if you were watching this on your cell phone in like a military submarine or something. I doubt any of you are doing that, but if you are, feel free to leave us a comment and tell us that that's what you're doing. But I also do apologize. It's been a while since we had our last episode. Talk about seasons of change. John and I have been going to college and we've been working pretty hard. I know a lot's been changing in his life. And to be frank, although my life's been busy, it's been pretty calm so far this year in terms of change, right? Nothing drastic or huge has happened. My family's stayed roughly the same. No big deaths, no big births, no new relationships. It's been pretty calm. But at the same time, I think I've been changing, right? Not in terms of like my morality or my worldview, but I've been learning stuff, I've been exploring stuff, I've seen and encountered new pieces of art on the internet, and I've met new people and formed new relationships. I think that's really like the backbone of change is forming relationships. Because as much as we might look at trees and seasons to talk about how they change, we can only really admire that change because they affect one another. The leaves changing color and falling from the trees and things getting colder and all that. I know they kind of go hand in hand with one another. In the nature of the world pointing in a different direction with relation to the sun kind of drives that. Much like whenever we change, it's usually because someone else helps us change. Like, yes, we can change on our own. We can kind of deliberate, and we can act on our own as free agents. But the most powerful change comes when we come together, and that's why I like fall.
Yeah, sorry, I had to leave. It was not a holdable situation. It was not. It was like it was not like it was like a Texas standoff, and I was losing. You know what I mean? Like if I didn't draw, I was gonna get
The winds of change were adrift.
No, more like the. I'll leave that behind.
Thank you for leaving that behind.
Yeah,
yes.
that was. So I flipped my washer upside down. I stole that trick from Elijah, but I had some earlier. We were talking about car-based infrastructure, and I just have a pet peeve I have to talk about with you.
Go for it.
Do you know what a pavement princess is?
A pavement princess?
Have you ever pulled up to a parking lot?
Is that like okay? Is a pavement princess like? Is that like a car that someone just treats like a little like a pet dog or something, or like a
kind of
like
I'm sure they
like
do.
You soup up your car, you wash it, you deck it out with all sorts of things, and like you treat it like it's a child or something.
But all they do in it is drive to work and pick up their kids from soccer practice.
Oh,
like have you okay? A pavement princess in my mind is a truck that has 6 wheels at the back for some fucking reason. Has like those massive headlights on the roof of the truck.
Okay.
And pops out of the parking space by like half a car.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And they're into the next parking space too, right? And they're this big ass, massive fucking SUV or truck with all of this souped up gear, and they have never hauled a thing in their life. Like they have never done anything like that. They just drive it to and from work. It pisses me off.
They're compensating. It's okay.
It pisses me off to know it. Well, it's just like the worst. It makes everything about car-based infrastructure worse.
It does.
I hate car-based infrastructure. The trucks just make it worse.
That's a very fair criticism.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just like the same thing but badder. Like, have you ever been driving like behind or one of them's behind you and you just like you can't fucking see anything? Because like the truck takes up your entire vision.
And at night it's even worse because they have like the brightest headlights imaginable.
Yes.
You're like, okay, like are you trying to light the road or are you trying to light the city?
Yes. It's a pet peeve of mine, especially at school because I park in a parking garage. And holy shit, that parking garage, if you have a truck that big, go to the roof because you are not built to be in this tiny, cramped, close quarters parking garage. Like, because literally, like, I'll have to, like, because, you know, it's about, like, going up and down. It's about 2 lanes for driving, so you can have one going down, one going up. And sometimes I'll be driving and I'll have to go like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I'll have to
I know exactly what you mean.
dodge around the fucking trucks. And I have a bad, like, my truck is extra long.
Yeah.
Right? But I didn't buy that by choice. I inherited it because it was free. Somebody willingly is buying these things.
It is kind of crazy. In our interaction design class, one thing we had to do was create user personas for people. And someone else in the class was focusing on parking as like their focus of making car-based infrastructure more manageable and better. And one of their user personas was an old cranky Karen named Edith Jimmy Dean, and she owns a Ford F-250, and it's huge. And she never parks like parallel to the spot. She parks over like 3 or 4 spots if she can. And it was just hilarious because we all know someone like that, or like we've all seen a car like that.
Yeah, we've all seen a car like that. Yeah.
And so it's like, how do you account for people like that? How do you influence their behaviors? Because all interaction design is trying to influence people's behaviors, whether it's directly, indirectly, whether you're obvious about it, whether you're subtle about it. You're trying to change people's behaviors, which is crazy because I thought the class would basically just be, oh, here's how you make pretty user interfaces that are easier to use. No, it's so much more than that.
Yeah, 100%.
And you know, looking back, it makes sense, right? But I thought it would be a much more technical class than it is, where it's much more like theory based, and well, not even theory based, but it's much more about the broader strokes of, hey, let's change how we do things because progress is doing things, and so let's do things better, and not just like not necessarily in the political sense of progress or societal progress, but just like make tools. Don't just make tools easier to use. Don't just solve problems. Look at the problems behind the problems and try to solve those. Don't try to invent a better can opener. Invent a pop tab so people don't need a can opener, right? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know, don't try to make faster cars. Try to build infrastructure that makes people not need cars.
Dude, I would kill in this country for high-speed rail between cities.
That would be sick.
You know how cool it would be just to be able to hop on a fucking train and like for a fairly reasonable price and like be in San Francisco in like half a day.
That would be really
You know
cool.
what I mean?
Or just portal gun. Just bloop bloop, you're good.
Listen, man, that's obviously the dream. But
we have a ways to go, I think.
we have ways to go before a portal gun becomes applicable.
Another thing, I just had it. What was it? Cars. Edith Jimmy Dean, Ford F-250, transportation, personal transportation, cars. I just had the thought. It's gone. I'm so sad. Do you have anything?
No, I was going to try and support you in getting back to your thought, but you already read, because usually what I do to help is like I say what you said to like kind of jog your train of thought, but like you already jogged your train of thought and it didn't come. So.
Oh no! But
it's tragic.
That has been an enjoyable class, and it is cool to think about. Well, what could we do when it comes to the car situation? How could we eliminate? Not the people who drive those cars, but just the cars themselves, the people.
Well, it's like even I remember I heard like in Europe there are so the term urban does not mean city. Urban just means tightly packed, right? Urban, really? An urban environment, right? So like you can have a small town be urban, and it could be great, but you don't usually see that because of car design. Because car necessitates parking spaces. It necessitates spreading out. Right?
Big, wide roads.
And what really gets to me is, like, people think cars are freedom, but cars are almost, in this country, the antithesis of freedom. Because it's not like you can choose not to drive a car.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Depending on where you live, but in most places, yeah.
In most places, you have to buy into the system. And in most places, like, if you lived in an urban environment where you could walk to and fro or use public transportation, you are just as free in your movement, right, than if you had a car. The idea is that you control it, but in my mind, you controlling it means everyone else controls it themselves, which leads to more death.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But kind of like what you were saying earlier, we're almost getting to this point in society where, like, instead of spreading outward, maybe we can just kind of dig inward and be like, hey, let's just, instead of, like, the problem might be, okay, what's an easy way to help people get from place to place without a car? But you can step back from that and be like, well, why do people need to get from place to place? And then you can try to, approach it from that way. And that's basically what we've been doing throughout all of interaction design is, okay, let's talk about our problems and our needs. And sometimes eliminating a need is not a matter of finding a solution. Sometimes eliminating a need is a matter of eliminating the source of that need.
I'll tell you what, like, I think eliminating, say, for example, office work. I know people infinitely prefer to work from home. Productivity, from what I understand, on many companies that implemented it went up. But, like, I don't necessarily think you should have office spaces or you should be forced to have office spaces. But I think everyone, because, like, working from home is not built equal for everybody. Like, everyone should be able to have in office in their home that they can work from.
Yeah.
Right? But, like, because for a lot of people, working from home is sitting at the kitchen table while your kids scream.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's not fun.
Well, and psychologically, too, it's just like if you don't have a designated space for working, then being in that space when you're trying to sleep or live or whatever is very stressful.
Yes. It's hard to isolate work from it. But, like, that does not merit, like the commute that some people are forced to do in cities and shit. Right? Because eliminating office work and eliminating having to go in for the commute literally takes care of so much of traffic. Like, how much of traffic every day is entire office buildings worth of people going to work to and fro in rush hour?
Yeah.
It's like, if you cut that out, then you cut out, I bet you, like, 50% of all traffic.
Well, and, like, for me, the best schedule would be I go into a physical building, like, once a week for a meeting, and then I work from home the rest of the week. And then in cases of emergencies, we can always meet up. That would drastically reduce the amount of people commuting every day, because as long as,
Decrease gas.
It would decrease gas. And we wouldn't need as many office spaces because more businesses could share them. So, like, you could have 5 businesses in one office building and be like, okay, this business gets it on Monday, this on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, right?
It's really kind of crazy that high-rises are suddenly, like, becoming not nearly as relevant. Because they made a lot of sense, right? Because it just allows you to put so much bureaucracy and so much, like, office in one, like, fairly centralized geographical spot. Like, you were just able to have an entire company in one building rather than spread out across the entire campus, for example.
Yeah.
But going into the future, that is no longer nearly as relevant. And in terms of power, the number one thing that zucks up juice is heating and cooling skyscrapers. You have to think how inefficient those motherfuckers must be.
That makes sense.
Think of how many windows.
That makes a whole lot of sense.
You know what I mean? Like, Like, you literally have to... It's just a big old fucking greenhouse in the middle of a building, in the middle of a city, full of other greenhouses. Just miserable. Seeing urban design going into the future is going to be really interesting. Because I don't necessarily want to eliminate... For example, in the retail space, it's like, I am noticing, at least in this town, a very, like, a steep decline in the quality of, like, where you can go to buy clothes because of the internet. Right? A lot of people buy clothes online now, and it makes sense. It's so much more convenient.
It makes sense, but it also doesn't, because with clothes, I would not be very comfortable buying them online, just because I want to make sure they fit, and I want to make sure that they feel good to wear.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I'm the same way, but the strategy for a lot of folks is, I think it depends on where you're at in life. We have time. We could go shopping every week, carve it out of our week. Whereas, an older person or a professional person may not just have the time, may not care. Right? So it's like, okay, I know what fits me. Buy it. Be done. Because here's the thing too, like sometimes, because the quality of the retail spaces is going down because they're having to compete with online shopping, which kind of has a feedback loop. People go to these spaces, they're like, these are not what I remember, these kind of suck. I can't find anything. So they go to online shopping, which makes the retail spaces work worse. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's there are still plenty of boutiques and smaller stores that I think are still doing just fine, but specifically like big retail, like big department stores are.
That makes sense. Yeah, the really big ones. That does make a whole lot of sense.
Well, and once again, like they're no longer relevant because the whole reason they existed was convenience.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, everything under one roof. You could buy everything you need. For Christmas, for clothing, for, you know what I mean?
Oh, now it matters. Yeah, but now the one roof has become my house.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, yeah, I have everything under one roof.
Yeah, I could literally buy everything I need under one roof already. What unique do you give? And really what those places have become is hard to staff, hard to keep clean, hard to keep relevant.
Yeah.
So boutiques are definitely the way of the future in terms of, maybe not boutiques per se, because my store is not a boutique, but it's like mid to small sized stores.
Oh, certainly. Because I think they definitely still have a place, at least for things like clothes. In other places, like, one thing I've noticed in Springfield is that the restaurant business is booming. There's so many people going out to eat. And I think that's because, food is one of those things like you have to... You either have to order it from a place and have it brought to you.
Yeah, you really can't, like if you want to have a gourmet meal cooked for fresh, you either have to have the chef brought to you or be at the chef.
Yeah, and so restaurants will kind of always be dependent on that location, I think, or at least for a very long time to come. I don't think there are any easy and obvious solutions to that, but it's just gonna be one of those things where, like you said, if there's a better way to buy clothes that's easier and cheaper and cleaner, people are going to do that. They're never going to go the path of more resistance.
Yeah,
because that's silly. But I do have hope for other kinds of businesses and stuff like that. And I've also noticed that there have been a lot of tools lately, like in terms of software and websites, that make it easier to run a business online. Right? Like so many stores that what's happening now is physical spaces are not being used to sell; they're just being used to store and to produce. So you'll have the factories, you'll have the workshops and stuff.
It used to be that the only place before the internet revolution that you could see clothing was either at the store or through a catalog, right? And catalogs were even worse about telling you what sizes were available, what fit you, and that sort of stuff. Because you can go on the internet, go to Amazon, and be like, does this fit me? Look up reviews and see if it fits your body type. You know what I mean? But back in the day, you had to have the space to sell. People who are on commission was more common. People whose job was to sell was more common. Whereas nowadays, it's you make so much money just because people get what they need anyway that you really don't need to worry about selling extra. If that makes any sense? I don't know.
Yeah.
But you're right in the sense, a lot of people run businesses without any of the overhead of having a physical place that they own that sells things. And if they ever do, they usually regret it because it usually just becomes a sink.
Yeah, they sink a lot of money into it. Where now there's plenty of services that let you, ship things easier. Let you pack your own stuff and you ship it out to customers online, and then boom, you're done. I have a rock climbing bag that for chocolate I bought recently. It was just from some local company. I got through Amazon, but they partnered with Amazon to ship it out. And it came in a really nice box. I was very surprised. I was like, this company's serious.
Yeah, but packaging definitely that's one of the ways of the future because a lot of a lot of the retail experience, whether online or otherwise, is the experience of shopping. It's not even the product, right? For example, for men in particular, a lot of older guys, I think younger guys are getting better about it, but a lot of older guys are like, oh, I hate fucking shopping. So I've gotten so many compliments all the time. It's like, oh, you just made this so quick and easy, because I just like know what they need. I put them in it and I get them out. You know what I mean? And that experience is going to make them come back, not because of what they bought per se, but because of how much they enjoyed actually performing the process of shopping. Whereas you have these other retail environments where you go in, you walk around for a while, you can't fucking find anything, and it's miserable.
Yeah.
Right? Nowadays, it could be the box. It's like, did it come in damaged? Did it come in pretty? Was it a memorable experience opening it up? I think there's a lot of people out there who realize there's a lot of dopamine from opening boxes. You know what I mean? Like, oh.
Now, one thing I do think is very interesting about physical spaces that might make them a little bit better than online retailers in some aspects is the aspect of window shopping. Just like sometimes you end up at the mall, right? And you're just walking around. You don't plan on buying anything, but just seeing stuff there makes you go like, I might want that. Because whenever I go on Amazon, for example, like they'll recommend like a few dozen things at most when I'm on there, but it'll be kind of arbitrary and random. Whereas if I'm going to the mall and I find a store with things that are under a specific category, like board games and card games, I might just start looking around. And just because there are hundreds of things there, eventually something will catch my eye, more likely than not, right? And so those physical retailers are really good at letting you window shop and just kind of find something you didn't know you wanted in the first place.
It's true. This is very true.
So I think there'll always be a sort of space for like physical.
There will
places.
be, but it's just going to be diminished, which I don't think is bad. I think small cultivated spaces, physical spaces for shopping, at least in terms of non-essential. Like I think of metagames. I think metagames is a very good model.
Yes.
Right? Like they're great for window shopping. You go in there, you can browse around a little bit, see some interesting stuff, have conversations about it. But they serve a niche enough clientele, and the stores, also has purposes beyond just the purchase of those items, that like it always has good foot traffic. It's just a really good medium. It's a really good middle ground. I'm sure they make plenty of money.
Yeah.
Right.
Reminds me of the collector store at the mall. It's basically another metagames. Because they don't just have things that you can buy, but they have that physical space to gather and meet. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that going on, because essentially what metagames is a sort of blend of different I guess, districts of an urban space. Because you have the retail space, sure, but you also have like the communal gathering space, the entertainment space. So it becomes a blend between this sort of commercial, a commercial space and like a personal space. I'm trying to think of the right word for it. But
Randy's had this idea to, because I get in touch with what you're saying. She's always wanted to open a restaurant, like a medieval style tavern, pub, game store, like play area, where it's like there's a restaurant, there's a game store, there is a section where you could like get communal tables for playing games / maybe get your own rooms like to play the game more privately. And I feel like that's such a brilliant idea because it's everything you need to have. It's an experience, right? You can go there if you're hungry, you walk out, you buy something. You can go there if you want to buy something. Oh, you go get something to eat because you're hungry. Oh, you go there to play, but you get food too, right? Because it's not that you have to have it, but it's that since it's there, you're gonna get it.
I mean, almost all urban designers right now, when it comes to broader infrastructure and stuff, looking forward, they're trying to think of multi-purpose spaces as much as possible. They're like, okay, let's stop this whole districting thing. That made sense for a while, but it doesn't anymore. Let's build spaces that can serve all sorts of purposes, or just have smaller, sections for certain spaces. So instead of, a city being districted such that, everyone lives over there and works here and eats here, and we have a couple parks here. Instead of designing a city like that, have like one city block with a park in the middle, a couple shops here, apartments on top of those shops, stuff like that. We're just trying to.
That's a more traditional urban design though.
It is, right?
That's like that's classic urban. That's European city design.
Exactly, and so we're kind of just going back to what worked before because we're realizing it made sense why we made these decisions with our urban planning, but let's roll things back. And one of the biggest thing with districting was you wanted to separate people who were trying to sleep from all like the factories and the loud noises and the air pollution and stuff like that around those more industrial areas. But as we get better about that, and we can make quieter commercial spaces, cleaner commercial spaces, we can start to reintegrate them back into
the idea of being able to go to the grocery store at the corner is a really fun idea.
It is.
Yeah. Like living and working in, because basically what cities are, like a well-designed city, I think, is like a bunch of mini cities.
Yes.
Right. So. A bunch of self-servicing mini cities with various major attractions that you have to, get out of your little mini city to go to.
Yeah.
There.
And I spread out and bad about it as Springfield can be. I almost kind of view it like that already because, we have the southeast side of town where I live, where I have a grocery store, a couple of restaurants I can go to, rock climbing gym, movie theater, and a couple parks. So I have my places there. If I find myself on the northeast side of town, I have a different list of places I can go to do all those things. So if I'm on the south side of town, I can do these things. Southwest, do these things. Downtown, do these things. And so depending on where I'm at in the city, I almost treat it like a mini city already.
Oh, for sure. I could definitely agree with that.
But it still suffers from being so spread out.
It really does, because while that is the case, there is not enough things in those mini cities. Like, you always end up having... For example, it's kind of different for us because we both commute, but, going to college...
Yeah.
It's like I have to drive 30 minutes every morning to get in, if not 45 on a bad day, on bad traffic. And I don't know, beyond words, because it's not it's not apocalyptically bad. It's not like I can't bear it. Our city's fine, but I wish I could live a life where everything was manageably in walking distance, because I think that does a few things for you. It keeps your population healthier.
Yes.
Even if they don't realize it, because walking burns so many calories.
Oh, it does, and that's why when I was doing my interaction design, I think my focus was on an app that encourages people to walk. Right.
It's so good for you. And two, I think it really helps build communities, because I think what being so separate does, especially in a residential area, the fact that you get in the car to go anywhere kind of separates you from people.
It does.
You know what I mean? It's like you're not dealing with people, you're dealing with cars. Once you get there, you have communities from where the places you go to, but not for the spaces in between. Where it's like in a well-designed urban space, or really a well-designed any space, I feel like the community develops because you're constantly walking around them all the time.
No, exactly. I look at people who live in my neighborhood walking by, and I start to recognize them after enough time. But I'm like,
you don't really know them.
I don't really know them. And how much more would I know them if we constantly ran into each other
at the grocery store.
At the grocery store, or at the same restaurant that's just a 2-minute walk away, right? And that sounds so cool, because right now the closest thing to my house is the closest thing that's not a house to my house is 15 minutes away if you're walking. During our project, we looked at this website called Walk Score, which gives every location a walk score between 0 and 100. And their walk scores are for entire cities, but also individual areas have a walk score, and they have a little map that sees how far you can go in 20 minutes based on the layout of streets and sidewalks, and calculates how many businesses are in that radius and whatnot. 0 to 100 scale. My house has a walk score of 9.
That's bad.
It's bad. Now, it could be worse.
Well, that's the thing. You don't really think about it. Whenever you isolate, you think, okay, all the people live over there, they're going to form a community. No, they're not. People form communities not because they want to, but because it happens.
Exactly. When you think of socializing, school is so important, not because, that's the only way you can learn things, especially nowadays. It's important because you get socialized. That's how you...
You're literally thrown into a miserable circumstance with a bunch of... not miserable is a hyperbole, but you know what I mean. You're thrown into a circumstance with a bunch of people who are facing the same thing at the same age. You're there with them every single day. Even people you don't know, you know.
Exactly, right? And you build that community around, around that aspect of just being in the same place at the same time with similar goals, right? And so people talk about the loneliness epidemic nowadays.
It's bad.
And it is bad, and I think a big part of it is car-based infrastructure, because it's so isolating in nature. Because, yes, you could say it increases freedom because you can be where you want, when you want, a lot of the time. But the flip side to that is, you don't naturally run into people.
And freedom is lonely.
It is.
Right? And it's also like, I think driving being conflated with freedom is just a fundamental error, personally.
I understand it.
Theoretically, I do too.
I understand it. Well, and I do think, like, as soon as I was able to drive, I was like, oh, I can go where I want when I want. This is awesome.
But that's because, like, if you grew up in a place where you could walk, it wouldn't have mattered if you could drive.
And that's the thing.
That's because you have to wait to be 16 to be free. Whereas in other places, it's like, oh yeah, you can go down the street and grab some groceries.
And someone could argue and be like, well, you know, once you get a car, you can go to, like, other cities and towns and states and stuff. Because, like, on my drive here, I was like, there's nothing stopping me from just continuing on this highway and seeing how far I can go. But I don't have any reason to do that.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, yeah, okay, great. Technically, right now I have the freedom to, you know, go to the park and pick up as many, you know, blades of grass as I want. But I have no reason to do that.
It's like taking a day trip, you know, around here. It's like, oh, let's take a day trip to one of our local urban areas, like St. Louis or Kansas City. It's like, okay. But, like, that is 2.5 hours of driving on both ends. Right. So it's 2.5 hours of driving, which is 5 hours total of your day that you have to plan around. And I know it's better for other folks, but even then, like, an hour of driving on both ends of a trip is fucking shitty. Like, taking a train or taking other public transport is different at the beginning and end of the trip because you're not actually doing anything, right? Like, you are traveling, yes, but you are being traveled. You know, like, it is happening to you.
Well, and
you are not doing it.
Well, that and it's something that you just made me realize is, like, driving requires a lot of focus. And so it's like, say it's you and one other person, you're driving somewhere for a day trip. You're not going to have very many meaningful interactions because one person's going to need to be focused on the road. And you can still talk and stuff, but, you know, when you're on the road, you're on this very specific path. Most of that road is just going to be greenery, you know, around you. So there's not much to look at. You're not going to get the chance to talk to other people outside your car or run into them. When I went to Kansas City, what was so cool is we were just walking downtown. We were, like, in the Plaza Center or whatever it's called, and this random group of people just walked up to us and started giving us high fives and fist bumps. I think it was because I was wearing a Mahomes shirt in Kansas City, but it was so cool, and I was like, you can't do that while you're driving a car.
Yeah.
You don't have pleasant interactions with people on the road.
If you have an interaction with somebody on the road, it's usually bad.
Yes, right.
It's like 90% of the time, it's bad. Like, they're honking at you, or you're honking at them, or whatever it might fucking be, but it's negative.
The only good interaction on the road is, like, if you, like, let someone over into your lane or something.
Yeah.
Turn. But, like, that's very, very rare.
Or, heaven forbid, gas station interactions. I'm not sure. I've had some weird ones over the years, man. People are fucking weird.
People are weird.
Gas stations are weird.
But that's another thing. It's like, you know, you go to all these unfamiliar locations, you don't know anyone, and so everyone feels like a stranger. So inherently, you're going to be a little more cautious around people you don't know. And you're not going to feel as safe, even though you're free. And that's another thing. You know, freedom kind of entails a lack of safety a lot of the time. Because if you're free to do whatever, you're free to get yourself killed.
But, you know, it's also like, yeah, we're free to stay on the roads. We're free to drive on the preset infrastructure for us. I think it's like I've heard of this thing called car brain, and it's something that, like, the general idea is, okay, you have been indoctrinated into thinking that this is the only way things can be. Obviously, we're not talking that way, but, like, no, it don't. And also, it's not the best. It's actually quite bad. Because even outside of... There are places, like, that have good urban centers where you can walk around, but then you drive between those urban centers. And that's okay. That's better than what we have. But we don't just have... Like, we have some urban centers you can walk around, but most of the time it's like you drive to an urban center to drive around the urban center.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think this finally reminds me of what I was going to bring up earlier, and that is one of my favorite parts of the process of doing this 15-minute Springfield project was the very first step, which was do user interviews. Talk to people, listen to their stories, listen to their problems. And what's so fascinating is normally you don't have conversations like this. You don't talk about car infrastructure and stuff like that. You don't think about it. But just because people don't talk about it doesn't mean people don't have things to say. Because during those user interviews, everyone started bringing up these problems about, like, oh, I wish I didn't have to do this, or I wish cars were this way, or I wish it was easier to walk for X, Y, and Z reasons, or I wish. We all kind of are aware of the issues surrounding, you know, our very car-based infrastructure, but we just don't talk about it. And that's not necessarily bad. Like, there are reasons we don't talk about it because we have other concerns. But it does go to show that we all kind of know that we could be doing better in this area, and that we are all affected by it, and we are all aware of its effect on us. We just don't we don't talk about it enough. And so I thought it was so fascinating how everyone had all these things to say, and just talking to people and getting them to think about this was really cool. But it's like, yeah, no, we just naturally don't talk about it, but that doesn't mean, again, that we don't have anything to say.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was a very eye-opening experience, because like we had before I started this 15-minute Springfield project, we had talked about this before.
Yeah,
I had talked about it with other friends before.
But knowing that it's just like not just like it's broadly supported, and people don't just like kind of halfway think about it. Like they have actual formed and articulate opinions that they harbor to themselves just because it feels like it is the way it is.
Exactly, and that's like, you know, what you said is car brain, because we're like, well, it's the way it is because it
is what it is.
It is what it is, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes it is way easier and totally justifiable to do that, because it's like, you know, we can't just turn off cars right now and be like, no more. We do have to accept the way things are, but, you know,
we also work to change them.
Exactly, you know, accepting the way things are comes with, well, you still can change them, right? And finding that balance is important in any area of life, but just with this one specifically, it's like, yeah, people get car brain, they get used to it, they're programmed. It sounds way more like malevolent than it really is, but they get programmed to think that they need cars for everything, and so it is harder to consciously, you know, consider alternatives to cars. But it doesn't take long at all when you start talking about this to start coming up with those alternatives and thinking about it, because it's all up in there. We just gotta pull it out. And so it was really cool, and so I'm excited for the third project, because that one's gonna be a lot more open.
I'm excited for you.
Right now we're supposed to be like journaling lots of problems that we have, just like little things. And part of me wants to do turn signals as my problem, because people do not use them enough. And it's so stupid how often they change lanes and make risky moves and don't use a signal at all. I hate it.
Yeah, I agree.
But also I'm sick of cars because of the whole project. So I'm trying to think of other like non-car based solutions. One idea I had was, half the time when you go, well, not half the time, but sometimes when you go through a drive-thru, you get a drink and they don't give you a straw. So you have to take off the lid, and then you risk spilling it, because a lot of the time there'll be like moisture or condensed soda or whatever on the bottom of the lid, or some around the rim of the lid that got caught up in there, and then it creates a mess. And I'm like, wait, why do we use straws? What about those coffee lids where there's a part that you just pop up and then you drink it like that? Why do we use straws? The waste a lot of plastic. For all those people like 10 years ago who were like, save the turtles, use metal straws, it's like, okay, why do we use straws at all? What is the point of straws? How does it help? I guess if you want to stir it, but if you want to stir it, just leave the lid closed, swish it around, pop it open.
I would agree with you, yeah.
Why? Why straws? There has to be a reason we do this.
I think it's because my first thought is that technologically we came to a point where we had lids and straws before we had cups or lids that you could drink out of, is my first thought. I'm not sure how true that is. Because I feel like straws have been around for a while and they're pretty easy. I also think like straws are very, in terms of the experience of consuming the beverage, they're rather nice, because you can like take very, very small sips / really savor the flavor. That's basically the only two possible reasons. And I'm not like a straw scholar, so, you know, take what I said. A scrawler. That sounds bad, actually.
But
speaking of, after the straw thing, I do think I want to end it soonish.
That's fair. That's very fair.
I'm gonna be going to my grandma's at noon.
I realized another problem with straws is things get caught in them. Like
yes.
Like if you're drinking boba, you have to get those giant straws just to drink that.
Yes.
It's like,
yes.
Well, you don't need that if you just have a nice opening.
I will say that boba in particular, boba needs straws, because like otherwise, like if with all the ice, you'd have to you wouldn't be able to get to the boba. Like that's kind of part of the point, like to have the big straw. Like that's like not normal though. Most drinks, like basically all drinks, would be better consumed without a straw. I have found myself like at a restaurant, like if I'm sitting down, like they'll offer you a straw or something, like they'll give you a cup with a straw, and I'll be like, I'll just use the cup.
Yeah, that's what I always tell them, and like I don't get it. So there are all those people who are like, oh, we need to make better straws. And I'm like, do we need to make straws?
We need to abandon straw-based infrastructure. It is corrupt. I don't care about the fucking turtles. I just think it's annoying.
I just think it's annoying.
I don't care about the goddamn turtles.
You know what? No, just because we're talking about it, I think I'm going to choose straws as my focus for my next project. I'm going to design a lid that doesn't require straws, which already exists, but I'll make a better one somehow.
Make a better lid, or even better yet, make like just. I mean, even if you just wrote a paper about how straws are bad and we could just leave them behind as a social construct, I feel like.
Because even things like milkshakes are like, oh, that's too thick to drink without straw. No, it's not.
It's like there are times where it's too thick to drink without a straw, but at the times it's too thick to drink without a straw, it's almost impossible to drink with the straw anyway.
Yeah.
Like there's a reason they usually give you a spoon. It's like there's two phases of milkshake. There's spoon and then there's drink.
Now, one reason people might use straws is so they don't have to tip the drink, because it makes it easier to make a mess.
Yeah, very much so.
Okay, so there is a reason for straws to exist. But also they do seem unnecessary for most drinks.
But also, if you supplied a sufficient type of lid, then you could negate the possibility of a mess.
Yeah, because like the coffee cups that have that, you already have a risk of doing that.
Yeah, of course you do. But it's like, you have a risk of doing that at any time.
Yeah.
Oh my god, that reminds me. One time, I was very young. We stopped at a Sonic drive-thru, and I think I got a sweet tea or something, and I raised it above my head. Or maybe it was somebody else in the car, but I think it was me. I raised it above my head. So the straw was caught on the roof, of course, but it didn't just like bend. It literally poked a hole through the bottom of the cup, and tea started spilling all over the floor.
Oh, that's right. That's happened with me with Sonic cups before. Now it was with the slush, and it was like a frozen slush. I'd already like been in the freezer because I was saving it for later. But yeah, I was trying to switch it around, and
it's the styrofoam. They're using
the styrofoam.
Yeah, very much so. It's really funny.
That's so funny. They did it with tea.
Well, no, I was in the car too, and I forget if it was me. It might have been my mom, but like I think it was me. I raised it above my head, pokes through. Just tea fucking everywhere. It just feels like the least likely way a cup could have broken and caused a mess. Like to make a little tube at the bottom that starts pumping tea, because it was just going straight through the straw.
Yeah, that's really funny. I think that's a great way to end our podcast.
No, I'm going to end it up talking about politics. So, Dark Brandon, Bosef Jiden, POTUS of the United States, President of the United States of the United States. What's a hot take? I feel like every take regarding a current sitting president is cold, no matter what way you say it.
A great way to end this, if you want to lean the political way, would be with a straw man.
Oh, I get it. Okay, so I get the joke. I also forget what a straw man is.
Okay, so straw man is
I know it's a type of like logical like fallacy.
Yeah, so straw man is where like someone has a stance, and
you don't argue that stance. You argue
an exaggerated caricature of that stance. Hence the term straw man.
So it's like if you're pro-life, I'm like you hate all women.
So yes.
Yeah.
And because so you turn someone's real stance into a sort of fake straw man that stands in for that stance, and you take down that because that's easy to take down. But that's not like what the real person actually meant or said. So a straw man would just be you ignore someone's real stance and you use a fake approximation of that stance and take that one down instead. So exactly like pro-life, you hate all women, or if someone says like I'm what's a good example? I don't know. I am for the death penalty. It's like, oh, you love killing people? Right, stuff like that.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah. So what you mean is that you hate ethnic minorities?
Yes, because if we look back in time, and see the origin of straws, ethnic minorities use straws way more than white people. Because white people, they love to smooch on their cups. They love to have an intimate relationship with their cups. Because, you're putting something into your body. You're putting all these fluids in your body. It's a very divine experience.
Divine.
Okay?
You sound like Dark Brandon
and so to separate yourself from that experience with the straw is sacrilege. Right? You can't do that. Right? It's like if I tried to be a Christian by doing a Zoom call in a church or something. Like on my headset while I was playing Minecraft, like barely even listening to the sermon. No, I have to go there. I have to be in the house of the Lord.
Kind of to change the subject, do you think that you could attend church in Minecraft, like authentically, like attend a service in Minecraft?
I've done that before.
But do you think it's like the same as long as it's performed?
It's not,
as long as it's done unironically, as long as it's done like actually as a service. Do you think you could attend?
It is not the same, unfortunately, because there is like a whole like community experience of being with people, like especially when you're singing like praise and worship, and being in a giant room with other people is awesome. It's really cool. Like if you're singing at home and like you're kind of singing along to it, it's not the same at all. But
man, we're just boomers. We like in-person things.
We like in-person things.
All right, party people.
Wait, you like in-person things? Okay, I bet that means you love kids. I bet you